Hey, what's up, everybody? I wanted to discuss this little segment. It's about 7 minutes of this debate between Peterson and Dawkins. So, this is going to start more or less on minute 38. And this is because up to now, Peterson and Dawkins have been debating about the truth, right? Like, how do you detect what is true, what is fantasy? For example, symbolism. Symbolism is many times discarded as, like non-existent. That's not scientific, right? I think at one point Peterson also points out that numbers are symbols, yet we never question like a number, like number two, number three. We know 2 plus 2 is 4. That's symbolic. That's fantastic. That's fantasy. Yet we don't question it, right? It's scientific even to say 2 plus 2 is 4. So this part of the video, I like it very much because what Peterson is about to do, he is basically losing the debate up to now because he has been avoiding questions, right? He doesn't answer questions directly, right? Like Dawkins asks him at one point, did the Virgin Mary really give birth to Christ? Right? And Peterson's like, it depends on how you look at it, because, right? And they're like the mediator, which you're going to see right now, is also trying to get the answers from Peterson. He's like, okay, but you can't avoid the question, because what Peterson is doing is he is answering that question by talking about another topic or by going off into another topic, right? So what Dawkins wants and what the mediator wants is for Peterson to actually answer the question, right? Like to actually say, what do you think? And I think this is, but that's another analysis. I think Peterson has trouble in debates. You see it because when he won those earlier debates that made him like viral and famous, he at one point he even says, "Ha, got you," right? Like you don't have anything else to say to me, you don't have a counter argument. And that's very like egotistical, right? That's like too proud. It's like what? Like you, if you can't recognize in a public debate when you're wrong or when you don't know, then you're not really making dialogue, you're just teaching people, right? So which he was a teacher, but it's like you also need to have that humility at certain points to detect when when things have surpassed you. So well, that's a different topic, but let's check out this part of the video then when Peterson makes a comeback. So what's about to happen is Peterson is not only going to recover but he's going to make an assumption which is huge. He's going to say basically that the fundamental principles, the underlying foundation of science is religion. Basically, like science is religion, except that science works with the material world and religion just stays in the abstract symbolic. But science operates on the same principles, on the same basic ideas as religion, as Christianity. And you're even going to see how like the mediator is going to like do this. He's going to kind of step back, and Dawkins is also going to step back because like like the fiery Peterson is about to come out right now. So that's what we're going to see, and then I'll comment on it afterwards. All right, so let's check this out.
Would your answer just be, I don't know?
Yes.
And you wouldn't consider it, I mean, it's not an inappropriate question to ask, just on a point of interest.
Right.
Did this really occur? And I think so often people are asking you that, and especially given the context of this conversation, we've heard everything that you're saying about metaphor and myth, but because the question is still then being asked, did it really happen? You know that that's what you're being asked. And the way you just so easily said yes, I wonder why you struggle to do that in so many other circumstances.
I think because I don't look at the situation the same. The way that Dr. Dawkins and I look at the situation are really quite different and at many, many, many levels. So even on the meme question, for example, like I know the literature on the history of religious ideas. I see how these ideas have battled across millennia in a manner that is very reminiscent to me of the same sort of claim that Dr. Dawkins is putting forward with regards to meme. I know that literature. Dr. Dawkins doesn't know that literature. And it's very difficult for me to communicate from within the confines of that literature because it's extensive and deep. And we're dealing with things that we don't understand the relationship between metaphoric truth and value predicated truth and factual truth. We don't understand that. It's a big problem. We cannot, there's no evidence whatsoever from the scientific perspective that we can orient ourselves in the world merely in consequence of the facts.
Sure.
And that's a fact. And it's a fact that's been detailed out in great detail in the last 60 years by people from a variety of different disciplines. We have to prioritize the facts. That's a value hierarchy. There may be true and false ways of prioritizing facts, but you can't determine the truth or falsehood of the way that you prioritize facts by making reference to the facts. That's a big problem.
Okay, let's talk about that as perhaps a slight detour here, because I think we do need to come back to this Christ resurrection thing. But Professor Dawkins, would you say that underlying the scientific enterprise is a fundamentally unscientific assumption? You can make scientific investigations in the world, but in order to do so, you need to choose what to prioritize. You need to choose what to investigate. You also need to value the truth. You need to have a value and a motivation for doing it in the first place. Those kinds of things cannot themselves be scientifically justified. And so does the scientific enterprise have an unscientific assumption in space?
I suppose it does. I mean, I think that maybe just be Jordan and Richard, by the way. I think that Jordan prioritizes myth and I prioritize fact. And I think myth is kind of vaguely interesting, but it's not the be-all and end-all of my life. I think it's somewhat secondary to scientific fact, the sort of facts that tell us how old the universe is, how old the world is, the history of life, the engineering achievements of landing a spacecraft on a comet. These are the things that science can do. And as I said, the predictions of quantum theory, to come back to that, but predictions of quantum theory which are verified to a sufficient number of decimal places that it's equivalent to predicting the width of North America to one hair's breadth. Now, that is, however difficult quantum theory is to understand, that is what you can get from quantum theory. Now, the mysteries of the Bible, if they are mysteries, aren't in the same league. I mean, they just don't cut it.
See well, okay. So let me respond to that. So one of the things that I've tried to study is the preconditions for the scientific enterprise itself. You appeared to agree with Alex that there might be presumptions, axioms that need to be accepted. I don't want to put words in your mouth because I want to get this right before the scientific enterprise can begin. So I've tried to think those through. So let me lay out a couple of them. This is partly what I've done while trying to make the case, for example, that you're more of a Christian than you think you are. So, for example, I think that the scientific enterprise is motivated by the axiomatic presumption that truth tends towards a unity. I think that it's predicated on the notion that there is a logical order that's intrinsic to the cosmos, that fundamental order is good, that it's intelligible to human beings, and that discovering that order and aligning ourselves with it makes for life more abundant. I think that the scientific enterprise is also predicated on the idea that the truth will set you free. And I think all of those axioms are religious and derived from the Judeo-Christian tradition. And if you don't believe that, you have to account for why science emerged in Europe and nowhere else in the entire history of humanity, for example, and why it's under assault from like all quarters now as that underlying metaphysic disappears. Like you haven't had to be concerned with the mythological substrate in your lifetime in some sense because it was intact.
Yes.
And so the universities could flourish and you had your freedom, remarkable freedom to pursue your scientific enterprise wherever you wanted, and people lauded you for it. Like that time is threatened, and seriously so. And I think it's partly because these metaphysical assumptions have now become questionable, and that's part of the reason that I'm attending to them. It's not because I don't admire the accuracy of quantum prediction, for example, or celebrate what Musk is doing with his capability of sending rockets to Mars. It's like more power to the technological enterprise. But you know what's happening in the universities? It's awful. And that's not a scientific problem. It's okay.
I agree about that.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting question. Why?
And it's so funny how Professor Dawkins just says, I agree with that. Okay, so now let's move on to the next thing, because like you have just solved that first part of the debate in like under 5 minutes. Peterson to me just did that. And what I think also happened is maybe, and I hadn't noticed this, but the mediator up to then was like targeting Peterson, was not attacking him, but like trying to make him see reason. And then all of a sudden, like he switches towards Professor Dawkins, right? And he tells him like, okay, now, do you think there's some type of, value hierarchy that science does need, right? Because Peterson has made that argument before. Like, yes, science is all great, but how do you decide what to study, how to study it, how to report it? The ethical implications, the priority considerations, the value system, right? All of that is abstract. It's mental. It's symbolic, right? There's no empirical way to see symbolism or understand like all of these more abstract things like value, right? So uh maybe by the mediator doing that, I forget his name, but I know he's a YouTuber. By the mediator doing that, that got Peterson to kind of like, start up his engines, and then he comes up with something like huge. Like he's like, and he creates like this sense of unity with Professor Dawkins too. Like we've both been professors. Like what the universities are like now. You know things are changing, right? And then after this, the debate continues, right? But I felt like that was a crossroads. That was a key moment in this debate, right? Where like up to now, Peterson it's like a boxing match, right? Where like the like one guy, in this case Peterson, has been getting punched on, beaten on, right? He's on the ground. And then right now, like all of a sudden, he just gets up and starts whacking this dude like down, like, so I felt like that was like a very key moment, and the claim that he's making, I mean, applied to reality also, like the questioning of, what is a woman, what is a man can be a woman can be a man, like all of these, the questioning or the inquisition on the biological scientific facts, is ultimately a questioning, or could be a consequence of the questioning over the past centuries, since like Nietzsche and all these other critics, atheists, like of saying, of questioning the basic religious principles, right? Like, and he also makes that argument, like that's why science flourished, or was in Europe, where basically like Christianity was, where these religious enterprises were. And again, like he mentions, and I agree with that too. I agree. I think with pretty much everything Peterson says here. You don't. This doesn't mean that you're against, or you even deny the objective, empirical, scientific, technological reality or dimension, because of course that, like he says, more power to you, more power towards advancement, progress. But what happens is that most people that, I wouldn't even say are in that field, but are fans of that field, like Professor Dawkins, or maybe some other like common everyday Joes that are just walking around saying, yeah, like science is everything. You need to check the facts. I don't want to talk about all of that mumbo jumbo, mythological, symbolic, fantastic, or fantasy crap. Like none of that is existent. Um, that's when you're not balanced, right? That's when you're like living fixed on one extreme, right? And that's when it becomes not dangerous, but your thought process is incomplete, right? You need this other side, this mythological, abstract, symbolic side, to make better considerations, right? And to a certain extent, I also feel like it frees you up a little bit from the rigidity of like the scientific method. And like I've already talked about that before in my other videos. Like the scientific method is subjective since its first step, observation. Like like observation has nothing objective in it whatsoever, right? It's completely subjective. Like you're observing something and it's whatever you perceive it to be. So just right off the bat, like the scientific method is also subjective. Science is plagued with like real science, real scientists, I think, that are in the field, in the lab, doing experiments. I think they're probably all like baffled most of the time, right? They're probably all like I thought this was true, now I'm thinking this is true now, like Socrates. Now I don't even know what's what, or no, who's the one that said that. I don't remember, but yeah, like you're just, yeah, I think it was Socrates, right? Like I only know that I know nothing, right? So um yeah, basically wanted to share that. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.